Thank you for joining Fidelity Charitable's presentation, How You Can Help with COVID-19, Creative Approaches to Economic Aid. As a reminder, the views and opinions of the speakers are their own and do not necessarily represent the views of Fidelity Charitable. Fidelity Charitable does not guarantee the accuracy of the information delivered. We encourage you to explore a wide variety of sources, including the information we've shared today, in implementing your charitable giving strategies and values. I would now like to introduce Pamela Norley, President of Fidelity Charitable.
Thank you so much. Hello and welcome. Pam Norley, head of Fidelity Charitable. So excited to be with you for our fourth webinar in a series of those that we've been presenting following COVID. So as I've mentioned, this is how to help with COVID-19, creative approaches to economic uncertainty. So this is a transformative moment in philanthropy as we think about the immediate needs of those impacted by job and financial loss because of the pandemic, especially at a time when in communities across the country, we are all demanding an end to racial justice and systems of oppression. The most recent job report from the Department of Labor tells us that 21 million Americans are currently filing for unemployment benefits, representing about 13.3% of the workforce. And the unemployment rate and the number of unemployed persons is up by 9.6%, representing about 15.2 million people just since February alone. And the pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on the Black community, both economically and medically. The economic effect is very troubling as unemployment among Blacks is about 16.8%, more than 3 percentage points above all Americans. And a recent Center for Disease Control Foundation report revealed that 33% of hospitalized COVID patients are Black, compared to only 18% of residents in the surrounding community. So as many of you continue to ask us for guidance in how to respond to supporting those most impacted, we've identified 3 areas for focus and shared the names of nonprofit organizations whose mission are aligned with 3 categories: supporting the medical needs, protecting a vulnerable population, and sustaining all nonprofits as the 3rd largest employer in the country. There are many other outstanding charities doing great work, but we've identified organizations into those 3 categories and made them available to our donors. In response to that, Fidelity Charitable donors have given away more than $3.5 billion through Friday to support 100,000 nonprofits across the country and the world. It's an inspiring outpouring of support, and we're very proud to be associated with helping our donors with their philanthropy. But many of you have reached out to us seeking even more ways to help, with a focus on protecting vulnerable populations suffering from economic insecurity. And with that said, we've built 2 primary objectives into our webinar over the next 45 minutes. First, we want to share some bold, very bold and creative approaches you can take with your philanthropy to get support into the hands of people who have been impacted by job loss or otherwise suffering from the economic crisis. And also bring to your attention how we can retain and retool Americans for the future of work. And second, we want to address the inequities the crisis will exacerbate over the long term and how your philanthropy can play a role in preventing that. So to help us with these topics, we're really excited to introduce you to our speakers today. We've invited Chris Hughes, co-founder of Facebook, Andrew Yang, a former corporate lawyer, social entrepreneur, 2 well-known, very creative philanthropists and nonprofit leaders who have long histories of working on creative solutions for economic aid. And they have some fresh perspectives to share on the situation and ideas for other donors that they can apply to their giving to support those impacted by COVID. And we're also really excited to have us join us Dr. Angela Jackson, an expert on workforce development and a partner at New Profit, to give us some insights on the future of work. And she recently tweeted, "The future of work is not preordained. With every investment and decision, we have the opportunity to create a more equitable future." The bios for Chris and Andrew and Dr. Jackson are included at the bottom of your screen there, and we hope you'll take a moment to just review their credentials and their long history of commitment to the sector. So we want to jump right into it. Chris, I'm going to start right with you. You've been involved in efforts to provide economic security and aid nationally and internationally for many years now, including with the nonprofit Give Directly. First, can you tell us a little bit about your philanthropic journey and what you're up to now?
I can. Well, thanks, Pam, for having us, and it's an exciting opportunity to be in conversation with all of you. So I'm happy to be here. So the cliff notes of my story is we co-founded Facebook in 2004. The company went public in 2012, and I unsurprisingly found myself in the role of a philanthropist and activist. I had done that kind of work for some time before, working for President Obama and others, but I now have a lot more money to give away. And I think probably like a lot of you on the call, I knew a couple things going in. Well, first off, I knew that I wanted to work on economic justice and related issues, poverty and economic stability. And the two things I knew as a philanthropist, so first I wanted to get the biggest bang for the buck. Where was my money going to do the most good? And secondly, I didn't just want to create Band-Aid kinds of solutions because it felt like we had plenty of big structural problems in our economy domestically and globally. So I started off thinking about how do you help people? And the first place that I went was people, friends, trusted advisors, and they pointed me to a lot of papers, a lot of books, and I went as far as I could. And one of the first things that I found and discovered was really counterintuitive. The most impactful way to help folks, at the time I was thinking internationally, but the same is true domestically, by all accounts, is to give them a hand up through cash, through unrestricted cash giving, which was a surprise to me, and I think is to a lot of people, because we have two sort of conceptual frameworks that we use most of the time to think through these issues. The first is, well, you can't just give a man a fish, you got to teach him how. There's this idea that skills build or the long-term ways of creating resiliency. And secondly, there is still the myth that I think haunts a lot of these conversations domestically of the idea of a welfare queen, or someone who's just going to take money and become reliant on some kind of government system. So in my own experience, I went hard into those myths and those questions and looked at the research. And the research is quite clear that when you provide people with cash, they use it smartly, their kids do better in school, they feel healthier, and they work just as much as they did before, if not more. And so there's this question of, do we give with the head or do we give with the heart? And I think the work that we're doing today and the conversation that we're having is that the two don't have to be in contrast, because with our head we can know that giving unconditional cash in moments of emergency, like with COVID, but also in the long term, is the most impactful. And if we open ourselves up to trust the poor, and to be frank, in much the middle class as well, to trust people, we'll discover that people are quite good at finding opportunities, climbing the ladders. We just need to give them the hand up. So the organization that I run, the Economic Security Project, this is what we do. We provoke these kinds of conversations. We support local leaders, mayors. We do policy research, and we do advocacy to change the structure of how we organize our economy and provide a guaranteed income. A little bit different than a UBI, similar idea, a little bit different, but how do we provide a floor to every American so that we can ensure no one lives in poverty, but also, particularly in this time of the pandemic, that people have the financial stability to be able to make ends meet.
Good. So I'll come back and unpack some of that, because I have a lot of questions, and I'm sure some of our listeners do as well. Let me now turn to you, Andrew. You've been working on startups and growth companies for many years, and in 2011 you founded Venture for America, well known for its focus on creating jobs after the Great Recession. And now you've started a new NPO, Humanity Forward. Can you just share again just information about your journey and how you kind of started Venture for America, and how now why you've turned to Humanity Forward?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I just want to frame this conversation, because we're all here today because of this COVID crisis. We're on the precipice of a new Great Depression. 40 million jobs lost, 16 million gone for good. I just read a story today that said that only 5% of New York's commercial real estate is being used, and that the people that are outside that sell buns or coffee or pizza to those tenants are just sitting there with no customers. So we're here because we need to think much bigger about how we're going to support jobs in this economy. And I became concerned about this through my work with Venture for America. I, like Chris, worked in startups, not as successfully as Chris. There's no like Facebook in my on my track record. But I wanted to help more young people become entrepreneurs because I thought it was so important for our economy. And working for a number of years in entrepreneurship, I came to realize that unfortunately the companies that are being created today are not going to create jobs like the companies of yesteryear. That there are many things you can do now with less. Where, you know, in the old days, if you started a small business, maybe you need to hire an accountant, a bookkeeper, HR, you know, some other people, and now you just subscribe to various services, and those are done for you in the cloud. So during that time, I realized that we needed to actually start thinking bigger along the same lines, and I learned a lot from Chris. You know, if you haven't read his book, Fair Shot, it traces his journey really effectively, but that we needed to get value into people's hands and create entrepreneurship in more creative ways than simply going to individuals. And I know, Angela, you do this work too, but we have to face facts that right now it would be very, very difficult to go to someone and say, hey, I'm going to teach you how to start a business during a time when literally like proximity is a negative, and the existing small businesses that are out there are closing by the thousands. So some of the trends that are being accelerated right now by the pandemic were trends that existed beforehand. The progressive automation of work, the fact that you can see it in the stock market, and if you're on this call, you probably have a lot of stock, but you can see that the stock market prices are heading in one direction while employment's heading the other. The fact is companies are being rewarded for, again, doing more with less. So my journey, Pamela, is similar to Chris's in that I realized that if we're going to actually create meaningful opportunities for millions of Americans moving forward, we're going to have to be more creative and aggressive and ambitious about how we get value into people's hands, and also how we conceptualize and measure our economy, where what's good for the big companies is no longer going to trickle down to that hot dog stand or that nail salon or that food truck anymore. So we have to stop pretending that it will. We have to start measuring our economy by how our people are doing as opposed to how the very, very large companies are doing.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I think that's a really good segue to Dr. Angela Jackson, who's at New Profit, who's just focused on the future of work. I mean, I think we all recognize that the skills of yesterday, the skills even of today, are not the ones we're going to need to be successful in our careers long term. So, Angela, if you could tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing at New Profit and how you came to be there.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is it just resonates with me about this need for a shift in narrative. So, you know, I was raised by my grandfather, who was a factory worker, who blue collar, was able to put me through college, through grad school. I have my doctorate, right? If you look at that same story today, it's not possible, right? So we know that work has changed. You know, he was part of the union. He had a wage that gave benefits for our entire family. So that really piqued my interest in the future of work, because I wanted to know what changes that we need to make in our economy to make sure that everyone can have that proverbial American dream, and that everyone could work a middle wage job and still be able to provide for their family. And you know, I think what we know today, and what COVID-19 has laid bare, that is not the truth. So my work, where I'm leading the future of work at New Profit, we're thinking about our investments. And when I joined the firm 2 years ago, it was really an upmarket conversation. So we were talking about, you know, what about AI and VR, and what is that going to do for middle management or for executives? What I brought to the conversation is really wondering, what was that going to do to people at the bottom of the pyramid? The people who aren't talking about the future work because they're thinking about how to put food on their table today. And then we know that COVID came and the future of work became the present of work. So really what we've been thinking about is some hard truths.
Hey, Angela, my apologies.
Right? But this,
we're interrupting, but your internet.
Amount of people.
Yeah, we're having some issues with your internet. I don't know if you mind calling into the number that we just put up there on the chat.
It's not, the internet is not.
Thank you. So Chris, let me go back to you.
Yeah, let me try calling them.
You Give Directly, and now what you're doing today. Talk a little bit about what Give Directly, what's doing. When you say, are you just giving cash to people? Is it microloans? Is it some level of reimbursement? Just talk about how that all works.
Yeah, well, there are a couple models here, and one is direct giving, and then one is some of the giving that creates the structure to create a long-term policy framework. So the direct giving is, I mean, Andrew is in many ways leading the way on a lot of these relief policies in this very moment. So I'm sure you'll have as much, if not more, to comment on. But in the direct giving bucket, Give Directly has done work for nearly a decade internationally, and recently domestically. And they're paired with Humanity Forward, Andrew's organization, and several others that are right now able to move your funds to people who can't make ends meet, who are either unemployed or who were never even covered by the stimulus package, like the undocumented, the people who are really most struggling in the time of the pandemic. So that the good news is there are plenty of ways. The rails exist, the pipes exist. You can move really as much money as you're willing to, in a way that provides immediate relief through Give Directly, Humanity Forward, and some of these others. At the same time, there's also a coalition of groups that the Economic Security Project and others is doing, that's specifically thinking about how do we take this moment and amplify this conversation, this need, and specifically by empowering mayors and others to put this agenda, put this item on the agenda, and then create policy change in the long run, right? Because I think we all know that in the spirit of not just doing Band-Aids, we need to provide emergency assistance and relief now, and we need to create the kind of structural change in our economy that makes it possible for people to feel secure. So that in the long term, it's not philanthropy that has to, step up in hard moments, but it's part of how we've designed our economy from a public policy perspective. So there's direct relief and this kind of long-term structural change, which I think both of these must happen in tandem. And the Economic Security Project, the group that I co-run, is leading the way in that second category.
Good. Well, thank you. And so over to you, Andrew. How have things changed from COVID? Is it just more of an acceleration of sense of urgency? How have you in any way maybe aligned your strategy with the current circumstances that maybe you hadn't had in consideration 4 months ago?
We completely switched gears, and I would urge the people who are on this call who are thinking about it to have a sense of urgency, as you just described, Pamela, because people are suffering at a mammoth scale. I mean, you can see it in any indicator you look at. You can see it in the food lines. You can see it in the giant lines for unemployment benefits. And our mental health. We had a mental health crisis before the pandemic. Now, crisis text line use has doubled and tripled. Like people are anxious and depressed. And we've been, to Chris's point, we've been giving out micro grants for the last number of weeks so our original plan, I think most people know, I champion universal basic income, which is everyone should just get a certain amount of money every month. I ran on $1,000 a month. Now it seems that members of Congress are saying $2,000 a month, which I would happily endorse. And so we were going to run pilots around the country to say, look, if we put money into people's hands, their health improves, their mental health improves, their kids' educational results improve, their trust in society improves, like everything gets better. But then we decided we didn't have the time because we're in the midst of this new depression. And so we started giving out micro grants immediately in increments of between $250 and $1,000. And anyone who wants to do this, like Chris just said, there are ways that you can just give people $250 to $1,000 just like that. My organization does it, and we have hundreds of volunteers who call the people who apply and then make sure that they are who they say they are, and that they're going to use the money in a way that we'd be excited about. Which 99% of people, literally, it's like, hey, I need groceries for my family, and you're like, all right, like that. That's like the conversation over and over again. There's another organization, Give Directly, that what they do is they partner with EBT Fresh, which is the way that food stamp recipients get their benefits. And so if you wanted to, you could send like virtually any food stamp recipient or a geography. Let's say you cared about Detroit or New Orleans or the Bronx. You could send every food stamp recipient in that zip code $1,000, and it would get there within 3 days. And I'm affiliated with an effort, Project 100, that is about to announce that we've raised $100 million to distribute in this fashion to 100,000 different food stamp recipients around the country. So the pipes do exist. Like in my case, we switched very dramatically from longer term universal basic income trials, which we're still interested in, to just emergency cash relief. And we put up a shingle on our website saying, hey, if you need a micro grant, give us your information, and then we'll send it to you via PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, or like, Wire. No one asks for a Wire. Everyone just uses one of the first.
Yeah, no.
And so now we're at something like 50,000 people who've requested money, which at $250 a piece gets you into like past the $10 million mark pretty quickly. And so we're taking money in and giving it out as quickly as we're getting money. And it's not just us, but like we're relatively distinct in the space. The other big one is One Fair Wage, which is doing it for tip workers. And they have a similar model. But people need relief really, really badly. And I will tell you, we're giving these micro grants out, and it is so heartwarming and distressing how much people like need the money. It's like you give them $250, and the people who are watching this are like, what's $250 going to do? But for them, like $250 is like, I'm going to be able to survive for another 10 days, 2 weeks, whatever it is. I'm going to be able to keep a roof over my head. So I would urge you, if you're thinking in this direction, to lean into emergency cash relief. It's highly efficient. Literally like 100 cents on the dollar will go into someone's hands, and they need it right now.
Yeah, no, and thank you for that. So that's, let me go back. I think, Angela, we've got a better connection for you now. I think you called in, we can see your video cam. But so let's go to the racial equality issues that we're dealing with today. One thing we would really like to learn about is the impact that equity is having on the current situation.
We know that right now that this COVID-19 is impacting disproportionately people of color. And so what we're really thinking about now is how do we truly have an equitable recovery and future of work, which is really important for us. So we're thinking deeply about how we use our investment dollars, and I say we, New Profit, to really invest it in entrepreneurs of color, communities of color, and really thinking about root cause issues. When you started out the webinar, you talked about how COVID is disproportionately impacting Black people. But if we look at people of color in general, they're disproportionately in jobs called essential workers, right, and represented. So they're on the front line. Recently, I was reading a New York Times article, and they talked about how subway ridership went down in every place but the Bronx, right? And so if you think about people who are in the Bronx who still need to get to work every day, these are people who are literally on the front line using that transportation to make ends meet. So when we think about an equitable recovery, yes, we want to give people immediate cash and reinvest, but we're also thinking about investing in what we call system solutions, really attuning to what are some of the root causes of these problems in the beginning. When you think about that 40% of Americans can't take an economic shock, they can't take their car breaking down, they can't take someone getting sick, that means that we had an economy, and this is pre-COVID, that means that we had an economy that did not work for a lot of people. Now, what has happened that I think we're seeing out there with protests is a coming together of what we're calling the left behind, right? The people who've been forgotten about. And so we can definitely give them money and cash in their hand today. I think that's important because people need food to eat. But where we're really investing in is making sure that we have this really just, right, economic recovery, that the people who have been most impacted by this actually have a seat at the table and telling us what they need. That's in addition to, one, is cash and opportunities.
One is like higher job opportunities to make a living wage and benefits, right? These are just the basics. And so we're investing in entrepreneurs and solutions that are thinking about how do you use technology, how do you use innovative and creative ideas to bring some of these ideas to the forefront. And as I share with everyone, we want to pilot these ideas, but ultimately we want to take the data that what we learn and share them on the Hill with lawmakers so that we can have data-informed policy that is worker-centered.
If I could just add one quick thing to that, Pam, I think that's 100% right, and really resonates with my experience and as well. And I think that the power or the opportunity now is to provide the direct relief and then to ensure that in the next recession, in the next crisis, there is an automatic stabilizing force in either a guaranteed income or some set of policies that ensures that we don't have to have this same call yet again. And that does require complex conversations about how public policy should respond that has a long-term view. And it has to happen now because the economic injustice is directly related to the racial injustice that happens in this country. And if we can begin to trust the folks who, as you say, Dr. Jackson, who've been left behind, then we can create an economy that actually works for everybody.
But so, Dr. Jackson, I just want to get back to you in terms of talking about, the technology that you're using to empower people to gain skills of the future. I mean, what does that really look like? I know some of the challenges often is you have a lot of tools and training and methodologies out there, but how do you get people to take advantage of them? Okay. Andrew, can you answer that question? Like, I know we provide a lot of information, a lot of access, a lot of planning and things to people, but how do you get people to that information and then kind of taking full advantage of it and then changing the way they're living or, kind of contributing to the community?
Pamela, I'm certainly very passionate about this. Your question actually includes the fact that it's not enough just to put resources up, like you have to capacity build. And for many people, capacity building ideally starts literally like day one or day zero. You're literally looking at people who are showing up to schools like not able to learn because of nutritional issues or trauma or stress levels in the house or any of a number of things. And then trying to show up in year like 25 and saying, okay, now it's time for us to equip you for the jobs of the future. Like you're 25 years too late. You can see that 2/3 of the educational outcomes of our kids are determined by factors outside the school. And educators know this. Like you look at an educator and say, hey, educate our children. And you're like, well, I can control about 35% of this child's outcome. And the 65% happens because of parental time, parental income, stress levels in the house, like all these other factors, what they do in the summer. And we, I have 2 young kids. Like kids are going to be in this massive trough as a result of this. They got taken out of school. Like you do your best as a parent. And those are like the households with resources. Like the households with no resources, these kids are coming home like that, like they literally don't have any food anymore because like they were relying upon school lunch programs to eat. So the capacity building, unfortunately, like, you can obviously make a big difference to folks who are like right on that edge. But the problem is that we've left many, many people like so far from the edge that we can put any level of information out there and it's not going to help get them to a point where they're going to be able to generate opportunities, particularly if you've set them up in an environment where this economy, even if you're like really, really talented, capable, experienced, like you're struggling right now. It's and it's one of the reasons why I feel so bad is that it's the entrepreneurs and the people who are out there working independently who are going to be struggling the most right now. Because if you imagine anyone who went out on a limb this last number of years, their business has gotten zeroed out. And if you are part of like very, very large institutions, then you're probably faring a lot better right now.
Yeah, no. I'm going to keep trying, Dr. Jackson. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I'm back.
Oh, good. Perfect. Thank you. So yeah, I was asking the question around How do you get people to take advantage of all the tools and information that you're making available through the future of work? And how do you get people to that information so that they can change the way they live?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of things. Yesterday, we just launched our Future of Work Grand Challenge, where we're giving away $6 million through a partnership with MIT Solves and the X Prize Foundation. And the goal behind that is to have everyday people come to us with solutions that they actually want to validate in the workforce. So we'll be giving away prototyping grants of $100,000 for people with ideas to work in their local community with workforce boards. And that might be a new concept to people on this call, but workforce boards pre-COVID was a place that 1 in 12 Americans went to be upskilled and retooled and went for navigation and career advice. So that's where we want to go, and that's where the population we care about, that's where they're going to look for jobs. So it would really behoove us all to modernize their offering there. So we're giving away dollars. So again, innovators can go create MVPs and prototype there. Additionally, we are also investing in other pilot ideas in cities. So we're selecting 5 states nationwide that will begin in January, piloting, again, some of these solutions that you'll see around transportation, childcare. You'll also see us, again, giving to entrepreneurs, because we know that entrepreneurs, Andrew, you say this, they are the game changers for an equitable society. We know that they hire more people of color. We know that they are the engines of their local community. So it really, again, behooves us to think about how we can get them back active and engaged in this equitable recovery.
Good. So is the partnership with MIT, is that just Boston based, or is that around the country?
That's nationally, and really it's almost internationally. While it's going to be focused on the United States, innovators with ideas from all over the world can apply. There's 2 parts of the challenge. One is with X Prize Foundation, where we're thinking about skills to rapidly upskill people. We know a lot of people have been laid off. Those jobs are not coming back. So we're thinking about how can we cut the time to upskill people, and how can we cut the cost of doing that more efficiently for these jobs of the future that are not estimated to be automated in the next 3 to 5 years, but also most importantly pay a living wage. And then with MIT Solves, we're thinking about what else needs to be true. And those are those wraparound supports around childcare, transportation, making sure people have internet. I mean, if you can just think about it, there's still 19 million people in this country without internet. So when our schools shifted to online education, like we set and left a whole set of children behind in just that decision. So those are things that we have to deeply think about if we're talking about an equitable recovery.
Yeah, no question about it. Chris, what's your reaction to that? Are you aware of other programs similar to this one around the country?
Absolutely, and I think I think that the focus on entrepreneurship and business support is really smart. Of course, we need to make sure that people actually have the money to be able to spend at those small businesses. I'm really struck by the image, Andrew, that you mentioned of folks outside of food carts, outside of empty office buildings with no business. I mean, we can and should create and support entrepreneurs. We've got to reskill people for jobs of the future. There's, to me, there's no question around that. And I think at the same time, we need to ensure that that we have an economy that has guardrails, that can provide people with support in these very difficult moments. I mean, you don't have to be an economist to know the basics of what governments do. We've seen it this cycle. $3 trillion of fiscal stimulus is poured into the economy, and it's propped up the financial markets so that they're relatively stable, a bit down, but given the scale of the challenge, it's that kind of structure that we need for everyday people too. We can do it for big banks. We should be able to do it for everyday people. And I think the good news is that this sort of big picture macro way of thinking about it has increasingly gotten sort of odd bedfellows, both folks on the right and on the left. And the folks on the left care, I think, a lot about the sort of justice-oriented frame, but the folks on the right care about efficiency, and they want to know what works. And what's going to help people put food on the table that's going to create jobs and work for the long term. And it's providing people the basic foundation so that they have the money, the gas money, proverbially and literally, to get out there and be those entrepreneurs that Angela is talking about. So I think that the more that we can build and support that consensus, and not only at a federal level, but at a local level too, the faster we'll see the kind of change we need.
So as we've been talking, we've had a number of questions coming in. So if you don't mind, we'll pivot to some of the audience questions. This one, and I'll just make them available to all of you. And the pandemic is worldwide. People want to be supportive of internationally, nationally, and locally. Do you have an opinion on where you can get the biggest impact at this time?
All of the above.
I know, right.
Bit out of, but yeah, I mean, I think that the challenges are extreme across the board, and we need sort of like a choir. We need people working on all of these pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, and Chris, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we talk about impact, and really that it's one subjective, right? And it's relative to where you are. If you think about shoring up, and just not that I'm so U.S. focused, but if you think about shoring up the population here, how does that mean? What does that mean for other economies when people can work, they can buy, they can purchase? So it's really this downstream effect. When you have Americans not traveling on the airlines, when you have them not visiting countries, like it is really tearing other societies apart who are dependent on our dollars to come to their communities.
Good.
I would say that the two things I would say, number one, just act now. Like there's a time scale, like anything you do now is going to be a lot more impactful than a while from now. So if you've got gunpowder, this is the time. Like there is no better time than right now to make this commitment. The second thing is to echo what Chris said, is that I think if you are here and you like leverage, what is the highest leverage thing we could do? It's like you have a government that just spent $3 trillion on fiscal stimulus, the vast majority of which did not go to families. It went to major corporations. And so if you reverse that balance, and this is why one reason I love what Chris does, is like you spend X to try and activate like 1,000x. At this point, 75% of Americans agree we should have emergency cash relief throughout the duration of the crisis until we bounce back to, that's a majority of Republicans, Democrats, Independents, everyone's on board. So if we make this happen, this is like actually a very high leverage way to activate resources to help weather this crisis. If you like that kind of thing, I know, it's like that might not be the like the focus of some of your organizations. But it's just math.
Yep. Dr. Jackson, anything to add to that?
No, I just think as we think about, again, impact and just doing something, my own personal model is just do something. It's
Yes.
A lot of times we get stuck waiting for the perfect thing to do or the right thing to do. In this moment, give. I think about if you can give, if you can, pay the person who's gardening, pay the person who's cleaning. I mean, there's really these small acts that collectively make a huge difference. And I think the other piece is, Andrew, what you said, I could not agree with more. Our government public dollars, millions of them are going to prop up businesses. How do we go out and advocate that same type of support is given to everyday people and that same type of safety net?
Yeah. So this is actually a very personal question. Somebody's asked, do you have advice or recommendations on how to use philanthropy to help small, independently owned businesses who've experienced hardship, especially businesses owned by members of the Black and Brown communities?
I'm happy to say I think there are some organizations and funds that are trying to just funnel money straight to Black-owned small businesses and enterprises. I know I've seen some online. I'm not sure about their legal structure, whether it's like a 501c3, but I've certainly seen some online efforts that if you vetted and kicked the tires on. But it's a great idea. A lot of those businesses are suffering very, very severely right now.
Yeah, no, we've seen, unfortunately, at this time, you do see a lot of fraud, mischief, whatever you want to describe it as, in the nonprofit sector. And, we spend an enormous amount of resources and time vetting organizations to make sure that they are legit, are 501c3s, and that they're doing good checks. That's really important for everyone because
just rely upon Fidelity, they'll get it done.
I just also add and just put in a plug for if we know Robert Smith, a billionaire philanthropist who, recently, it was a year ago, paid off tuition for the whole class of Morehouse College. He's starting an initiative to support Black businesses because we know that unfortunately a lot of the Black small businesses did not receive the PPE loans, right? And they had a hard time accessing those loans because of preconditions, rules, regulations. One, that they were just too late to get there, right? Even though they hadn't missed the deadline. So I would check out what he's doing because really we want to think about joining efforts like this to open up more dollars around PPE. So it's not only Robert, but it's also Magic Johnson is doing the same thing with his charity. So you can Google both of those. And then two, the best thing that you can do, and we're doing it here, I'm located here in Boston, they've put a list of businesses where you can support African-American businesses. You can support small businesses. And I mean, when we say buy a gift card, go get a takeout lunch, like those things matter because again, their rents are due on a monthly basis and they need cash in hand right now.
Okay, so we are getting close to being out of time. I just do want a quick lightning round. What gives you hope right now? Starting with you, Andrew.
The fact that millions of Americans got $1,200 stimulus checks and enjoyed the experience gives me hope that there's more where that came from, that our legislators will actually listen to their constituents and do what's right, not just for the people, but for our economy. We all know that you need a middle class to have any kind of healthy economy, and the American middle class is dying. So I'm optimistic that the popular wisdom will prevail, and that our Congress will follow the will of the people.
Yes, Angela.
Yeah, I heard someone say this, and I'm going to copy with pride. It's called the Corona bonus. The fact that we've all had a moment to sit still at home and really empathize and be in the shoes of others for a moment and see some of the inequities. And I mentioned earlier the coming together of the left behind. Really seeing that, this narrative of welfare queens or people, just wanting to sit home and collect the checks, that really isn't true, that we have a lot of hard-working people who worked hard their whole entire lives who are suffering, and now we don't have distractions. We all have to watch it every night on the nightly news, and hopefully, I am hoping that will be a shift and some empathy when we come out on the other side.
Good, thank you. And so, Chris, bring us home.
The fact that we've had nearly 1,000 people on this call in this moment, and not just any people, but maybe 2,000 according to Pam. I don't know, a lot of people who, I don't think people are here because they have to be here. They're here because they're galvanized and engaged. And if they're like me, also a little lonely. And the loneliness, like you were saying, Angela, can be really generative because it reminds us, or I think it reminds me, and I think it probably reminds many of you, that we are social creatures. That none of us lives on our own, that none of us can, become rich on our own or, be happy on our own. We all rely on one another. And if we're going to take anything away from this moment, I think that there is a redoubling of a sense of commitment and a sense that we want to take care of each other as fellow Americans and challenge ourselves to, and from a global perspective too, of course, but challenge ourselves to be the kinds of activist individuals and citizens that we can be at our best. So I do find that helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, we want to be the change we want to see in the world. I just have to read a quick disclosure. So the views and opinions of the speakers are their own, but there are many ideas out there. As a cause-neutral organization, Fidelity Charitable, we encourage all to explore all the ways that you can help, including the ones mentioned today from our speakers and others, and contribute in a way that best matches your values, comfort levels, and beliefs. So, we're going to end again with the message that we've been giving to our donors, which is give with a sense of urgency, give in an unrestricted way, and give in collaboration with others. That's the way that we're going to be able to address these things. So thank you so much. I'm so grateful. Fidelity Charitable is so grateful for your time, and thank you for joining us. Take care. Be well.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Stay safe out there. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.